this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Hi, listeners. I'm Anna Sinfield, the host of the Girlfriend Spotlight, and I've got some great interviews coming your way. I'm also excited to tell you that you can now get access to all episodes of season 1, 2, 3, and 4 of The Girlfriends, and every single episode of the Girlfriend Spotlight 100% ad-free, and 1 week early through the iHeart True Crime Plus subscription, available exclusively on Apple Podcasts. Plus, you'll get access to other chart-topping true crime shows you love, like Betrayal, Paper Ghosts, Piketon Massacre, The Brothers Ortiz, What Happened in Nashville, Hell and Gone, The Godmother, and more. So don't wait. Head to Apple Podcasts, search for iHeart True Crime Plus, and subscribe today.
This is Ryder Strong, and I have a new podcast called The Red Weather. In 1995, my neighbor, Anna Trainer, disappeared from a commune.
It was nature and trees and praying and drugs.
So no, I am not your guru.
And back then, I lied to everybody.
They have had this case for 30 years.
I'm going back to my hometown to uncover the truth. Listen to The Red Weather on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You know Roald Dahl. He thought up Willy Wonka and the BFG. But did you know he was a spy? In the new podcast, The Secret World of Roald Dahl, I'll tell you that story and much, much more.
What?
You probably won't believe it either.
Was this before he wrote his stories? It must have been.
Okay, I don't think that's true.
I'm telling you, the guy was a spy.
Listen to The Secret World of Roald Dahl on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Then she says, have you seen a photo of my son? And I'm like, who is this person?
Welcome to the Boys and Girls Podcast. Arranged marriage is basically a reality show, and you're auditioning for your soulmate. And who's judging? Only your entire family. I sacrificed myself to this ancient tradition, hoping to find love the right way. And instead, I found chaos, comedy, and a lot of cringe. Listen to Boys and Girls on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everyone, it's Emily Simpson and Shane Simpson from the Legally Brunette podcast.
Each week, we're bringing you true crime through a legal lens.
Whether you want all the facts on the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, or you still need to wrap your head around the Diddy verdict, we're breaking it all down step by step.
And we're not just lawyers, we're also husband and wife. It makes for some pretty entertaining episodes.
Listen to Legally Brunette on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Cool Zone Media.
We are back. It's Behind the Bastards, the only podcast that will be allowed once our junta takes over. We're actively planning the overthrow of the U.S. government and the end of democracy, but not to any kind of political end. We don't really have an agenda or a plan. We just really want to get more people listening to podcasts. So, a worthy cause for democracy to die as a result of. Mara Wilson, how do you feel about killing democracy to moderately increase the profitability of a podcast?
I guess it really depends which podcast we're talking about.
This one, not one of those other podcasts.
Yeah, this one, for funsies, destroying democracy for funsies.
A little destroy democracy.
A little bit, we can, for Anderson, who's been very cute. Yes.
Yeah. Think of the dog food Anderson will be able to afford once we purge all of the opponents of our new regime,
If there was a dog food that was that worth it, I would spend every dollar on it for her. Every dollar.
Mm-hmm. That's what we're going to do with the dissidents, is turn them into quality dog food.
You deserve it, Anderson.
Of quality dog food, not really speaking of that at all. That has nothing to do with our guest today, Mara Wilson. Mara. How are you doing? How are you feeling as we come into part 2 of this?
I'm doing okay. This is very infuriating to me for a lot of reasons, but I am glad. In some ways, I'm very glad that this is something that I'm passionate about and I fucking hate. And And
I'm thrilled.
Yes, that I can rail against it on record.
Not about the you hating this, but you've been a great guest. I am also thrilled about your memoir, Where Am I Now?, which people can buy wherever books are sold. Or you can buy it wherever books are sold, take it to a place where books aren't sold, sell it there, you know?
Yeah.
Help out a little bit. Why not? Mara, as a side note, you were, in a movie people probably know, famous film, Matilda, in which the bad guy is an evil used car dealer. We talk a lot on this show about how used car dealers in general are one of the largest funders of the radical right. How would you feel about us repurposing some of the old art for that into like World War II era, like we have to destroy the car dealer menace propaganda posters?
I do kind of wonder about, Danny DeVito might be in favor of that.
Yeah, he seems like a pretty cool guy.
Oh, he's very cool. He's very cool. Like, yeah, he's very cool. And he's also not a bad guy to talk politics with, in my opinion. But he and I think, have similar beliefs. So, yeah.
That's genuinely nice to hear. Well, folks, make Matilda proud. Destroy the political power of the car dealers trying to wrench our country away from democracy. I know I just talked about ending democracy to increase my profits, but it's bad when other people do it, obviously. Speaking of things that are bad when other people do them, wilderness camps. Not the best intro, but whatever. Mara, you brought up last episode. I just wanted to highlight this because I thought it was particularly perceptive. The similarities to Synanon. Which was really meaningful because while I think that there's maybe aspects of like the way in which they would kind of like basically kidnap addicts that were probably inspirations to Steve Cartisano for doing this at his camps.
Right.
The more direct inspirations were how they did a lot of the actual quote unquote therapy, because one of the things that he was a big advocate for in his camps was what's called anger therapy. This is when you sit everyone around in a circle and have everyone yell at one person at a time about how shitty they are and what a terrible person. It's basically the whole group abuses every individual member in it, one person at a time, right? And the fact that that's such a rending experience creates this like feeling of catharsis. That's the idea, right? The reality is it's just incredibly psychologically damaging.
Yeah, but, I think it's sort of like if you get into a fight with somebody and they say really mean things to you, afterwards, that's going to stay with you. You're going to think, for the time, oh, this is what they really think of me. Are they, and that affects your relationships and that affects your self-perception.
So when we talk about troubled teen wilderness camps that starve and beat students, the obvious question that comes to mind is, how on earth is any of this legal? And in order to tell that story, we have to go back in time again to the 1950s and the Second Red Scare. In the post-war era, you see the birth of organizations like the John Birch Society, which had been formed kind of as a reaction to the fact that the New Deal got forced through and all of these rich guys had to get slightly less rich so other people wouldn't starve to death. So in order to stop that from ever happening again, they start funding these conspiracist organizations like the John Birch Society, which preaches about a vast communist conspiracy in which your sinister socialist professors and teachers are gonna steal your kids, right? Like that's a big part of the propaganda they put out. And this is the first time in which conservative parents start organizing as a group and insisting on doing their own audits of schools and of teachers, initially just to try to ferret out communist influence. Now, not long after this, you start getting desegregation, which leads to an explosion in the growth of private school facilities. And again, a lot of parents being like, we should have the right to ensure our children don't have to be educated next to kids who are a color we don't like, right? That comes in right alongside, we don't want our kids to be taught communism.
Well, the funny thing is, I think that this led to, and it is something that even went on, I think, in the 90s and 2000s. There was this sort of like my family were like lower middle class. My dad was like a libertarian Republican, and my stepmother was kind of apolitical. She's Filipino Catholic, so she was religious. But basically, they thought that private schools were inherently better than public schools.
Yeah.
Which meant that I spent most of my time at public school because, you know, I guess my mom had been a Democrat. And then when we got older, they really pushed my sister into going to private school. But since we weren't wealthy, she ended up at like the shittiest private school ever because there was no oversight and it was inexpensive. And so that happens all the time, that people end up going to these places where there's no oversight and crazy shit happens all the time. Like, that's what it is. Like, my sister ended up at this school where just all this crazy shit happened.
Yeah.
And it was like a very specific religious sect that none of us belonged to. And so she got kind of brought into that.
They believe in God. There's no way they'll abuse kids like the Catholic Church.
Yeah. And I mean, it wasn't like actively abusive to her, but it was weird.
It just sucked as a school. Yeah.
Yes. She has a lot of very crazy stories about like, oh yeah, there was a man who was living in the gym. And
see, that sounds like
because his wife kicked him out, but he was like in good standing in the church, so he lived in the gym.
Put him up in the gym. Oh man! See, I have my experience with private school kids that makes me always laugh whenever parents talk about like, this is what I'm going to do so that the public schools don't ruin my kid by teaching him secular values. There was a Catholic private school called Jesuit in the Dallas area, and the Jesuit boys were who you would buy drugs from as a teenager. Because the Jesuit boys always had weed and acid and like cocaine and stuff. Yeah.
They're all on drugs and like serious drugs too. Like nobody could afford cocaine at my public school, but they could at my private
Only
school.
rich kids can be. And they cut it with baby powder to sell to the poor. It's tragic. That's why I operate a charity that provides underprivileged kids with quality blow. This shit is straight from Colombia. We don't step on it at all. Only Sophie. It's a 501c3. We're allowed to talk about it on the air.
Does your friend Oliver North help with it?
Yes, actually. He's been a huge part of our organizing. He knew a lot of people.
Did he die?
No, I think he's got to still be alive.
Is he one of those like,
I'm pretty sure he's still alive because I don't remember having a party for it. And I will have a party when Ollie North dies. So we were talking about why the laws allow for these kinds of facilities. And yeah, a lot of it has its roots in kind of desegregation, this fear over communism. And the whole religious right gets birthed in the 70s over what might euphemistically be called a question of school choice, right? They're angry at like integration of Bob Jones University, right? There's going to be black people at our private school. And an idea kind of starts to spread in American society as the religious right gains more power that parents are having their rights infringed upon by the existence of a society that might at some point expose those children to attitudes and ideas their parents dislike. This is low-key one of the most dangerous things in this country right now. The parents' rights movement is pure evil.
Familiar.
Yes. In an explainer for the AP News, Brooke Schultz writes, quote, in 1972, the U.S. Supreme Court cited parental rights when it allowed Amish families to exempt their children from high school. In Wisconsin v. Yoder, the court acknowledged that it was an exceptional case since the Amish live separately and self-sufficiently, said Joshua Weichert, a lawyer and professor at West Virginia University. In lawsuits stretching back to the 1920s, courts have affirmed the rights of parents to direct their children's education, but they have emphasized that there's a balance to be struck with the state's obligation to protect children's welfare. Now, recognizing the obligation doesn't mean that you actually act as if there is any obligation. And one of the things that has resulted from this is you've had states like Utah establish what are like very permissive parental rights regimes, right? And as I noted last episode, that's why there's such that's why all these facilities are located there. There's other states where kids have more protection if their parents are crazy assholes who want to send them to an abuse camp. But if you get those kids across the border and down into Utah, they have no rights anymore, right? The parents can do literally anything to them because there's this idea that like, well, you know, particularly this faith-based idea that like the parent ought to be absolutely sovereign to the child, which again is bad.
Yeah. It's, I mean, that is a Christian thing and a Mormon thing of the strict hierarchy of, you know, there's God, then there's the father, then there's the mother, then there is the children. And it, you know, it is like they are right below Like the hierarchy is reinforced at every time, at every turn. Yes.
I'll admit, this is a complicated thing to figure out as a society because, like, I don't think the solution is the state has absolute power over the lives of children because that's not great either necessarily.
Historically, that has not turned out well.
It doesn't end well. But also, the kids are children. They're not they're not capable of like having absolute sovereignty over their own lives like immediately. I think there's probably the best you can do is kind of a sliding scale, and try to make sure that there are like human rights protections that make it impossible to force certain things on kids ever, no matter what.
It's really
it's not an easy problem.
If you talk to anybody who's like ever worked with CPS, they'll you can just see like the exhaustion in their eyes when they talk about it because they're like, yeah, it's a really hard line.
It's a very difficult thing to do.
It's very, very difficult. And there's certain things like I know in some states, like if a parent leaves marks on their child, like that's enough to prosecute them. And then there's other states where it's like, no, beat your kids as much as you want. Like they are your children, you can do whatever, or even have somebody else beat your kids and it's not that big of a deal.
And I think, as we acknowledge that it's kind of messy to try to figure out where exactly the line should be, the line certainly shouldn't be where Steve Cartisano puts it, right?
Exactly.
Where you can pay to have your kids abducted and starved in the desert.
Yeah.
And what's justifying all of these extreme interventions, again, is like drug use, right? The fact that drug use is so fucking scary and concerned parents have become the most powerful voting bloc in the country, like both liberal and conservative parents in the in the 80s and then in the 90s, all have to be anti-drug, all have to talk about it like, as opposed to, well, this is a thing that carries some dangers to kids and we should make sure that they're informed about it. And, there should be a degree of awareness in society about this. No, this is like going to ruin entire generations. And anything we do is justified in stopping this scourge. Steve Cartisano rides that wave.
I know that like people who claim to have been hippies back in the day, like that is...
You motherfuckers smoked pot once.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, it's a much smaller percentage than we think. It's a much smaller percentage than we think. But it happened to enough people, and enough people knew people who, smoked weed and, like dropped acid to know that these people did not end up, murdering people and, and heroin addicts. Like, you would think that people in the 80s and 90s who had lived through the 60s and 70s would at least, if I had not smoked a lot of weed themselves, known somebody there, like known people who did.
I think the two things that really amp this up to a massive degree are, number one, like heroin gets a lot more common. And heroin is a drug that if you fuck up on heroin, the consequences are more severe than smoking too much weed or even generally drinking too much. Obviously, drinking too much can be deadly, but it's you got a lot more wiggle room with drinking than you do with fucking horse. And the other thing, probably the bigger thing, is the AIDS epidemic, right? Which is tied to drug use, particularly intravenous drug use. And kind of, it does help make the case to these parents that like, well, anything that sets you on a road that ends in heroin is like, you're going to die, right? So we have to intervene early on.
And probably crack as well, which is also...
crack, you're right. Crack is also a massive part of this.
And has a very racialized component.
Yeah.
So, because...
That's probably that's less of a factor in these rich kids' parents being concerned, just because of like where crack is, like, although coke is probably... Anyway, whatever. Yeah. We don't need to get too much into it. But yeah, that's kind of the stakes that are being set up. And it's important to understand where the stakes are, because the thing parents are letting their kid, like, happen to their kids are insane. So once local law enforcement starts getting involved, kids start escaping the camp and like showing up in town or showing up at the police station like battered and bruised, or in some cases are taken to their parents after they're like let out. And so doctors start looking over these kids. In one case, a doctor counted more than 80 scars, marks, and contusions on the body of a single teenager. Another former student told the police that they had been dragged through the desert by instructors and then tied to trees as a punishment for not wanting to hike. Like insane shit, like not even like tough love stuff, like just actual torture. As legal issues mounted, Steve seems to have mostly fucked off to spend the company's money on stupid shit. Frustration over this eventually led to one of his top employees, admissions director Gail Palmer, to quit and start Summit Quest Inc., which is just a copycat of Challenger without all the baggage, right? But she is basically doing it. It's a 63-day course, just like Challenger. And the business plan is the same. This time, Gail's going to run it, and she's going to hire some fucking drifters and give them a bunch of troubled kids and leave them in the desert for 2 months, right? And I want to quote again from John Krakauer, writing for Outside Magazine. 5 students were enrolled in the inaugural Summit Quest course, which cost $13,000 for 63 days. Palmer sent the group to the arid Shivitz Plateau near the north rim of the Grand Canyon, supervised by 2 young counselors who were paid minimum wage. During the first several days, Michelle Sutton, a pretty 15-year-old who had enrolled voluntarily to regain self-esteem after an alleged date rape, complained repeatedly of exhaustion, sunburn, and nausea. As the group hiked through the desert, she vomited up most of the water she tried to drink and pleaded that she could not go on. According to counselors' field reports gathered by state and federal investigators, the lead counselor had been ordered to ignore such talk as manipulative behavior. "You have been sloughing off," she told Sutton. "You are now being warned." Now, a couple of things are going on there. One of them, probably the bleakest part of this, is that like Sutton was not sent here by her parents or against her own will. She was raped and thought this program might be therapeutic for her, right? And this gets to what we've been talking about. These counselors who don't know what they're doing, who have no education, just treat every kid the same. And the way they are trained, and this is Steve's training, right? Everything in this course has been stolen from Steve's program. Steve's program teaches anytime kids complain or say that they are physically uncomfortable or ill, they are trying to manipulate you.
Well, that's like they all of these things, they always say children are incredibly manipulative, teenagers are incredibly manipulative. And like some are, but teenagers don't. Manipulation usually requires some kind of foresight.
It's also like...
And teenagers aren't known for that.
It's like when people say babies are manipulative, right? Because a baby will like modulate how it cries or whatnot in order to get certain kinds of attention.
It's like
you can call it manipulative, or you can say like they have needs and try to fill those needs. Like the teenager who is dehydrated and needs medical attention, you know?
Also, when you like I got heat exhaustion last year on my birthday because I'm a late July baby, and I was stupid and decided to have a party outside, and
many such cases.
We all got heat exhaustion, and I was the next day I felt like I was going to throw up all day long. And yeah, if you feel like you're going to throw up after heat, like that is when shit is really serious, and you really need to you need medical attention right away.
Yeah, you need to immediately start pounding the hottest coffee that you can get. And ideally just get on a treadmill and sprint through it, That's what's going to help.
Yeah, when you can't see anymore, then that's when you know that
that's when you're better.
Yeah. But yeah, when you're vomiting up water, that's
a horrible sign. Get to medical care.
And the thing is, these there are probably people who are like, "Oh yeah, this would be good for me." Like, I remember reading about like Outward Bound and being like, this could toughen me up.
A real program, Michelle might have, a real program with responsible counselors who were not pushing kids too much and understood medically, wilderness first aid could have been helpful to her.
Yeah,
right?
It could have been empowering to somebody who'd been through a sexual assault.
If she thought I think I might benefit from this, it probably is something that might have benefited her. It's just the adults that, for one thing, there was no kind of licensure for these programs. Not really. There was no kind of like state board that was actually looking into any of this. So Michelle, when she started looking for programs, had no way of knowing who is legitimate, right?
Yeah, what's like the summer camp program, what's like a therapeutic program, and that's the thing. A lot of these advertise themselves as therapeutic.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what happened, right? And because the fucking Palmer, who again is trained by fucking Steve, just brought in minimum wage people who like did not understand anything about wilderness survival, they'd miss that she has the symptoms of heat stroke and dehydration. And if you ignore those symptoms and force someone to do an arduous mountain trek, there's a good chance they're going to die. And that is exactly what happened to 15-year-old Michelle.
God,
now,
15.
Yeah, it's fucked. Palmer alleged that Sutton, who, remember, was in this program voluntarily after being assaulted, had died not because of dehydration and heat exhaustion, but due to a drug overdose, right? Palmer didn't even do the work to know why this kid was there. She was like, a kid in my program. I'll just say she was a drug addict, right? Like, it's so vile. It's vile and lazy.
It also doesn't make any sense because don't they examine them to make sure that they're not like,
How did she get drugs?
Yeah.
Did you let her get drugs out there? How is that happening? That doesn't make you better. You realize that doesn't make it better if she got access to drugs out here.
That's even worse. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, obviously, there's an actual coroner's inquest here, and a doctor confirms that she did not die of a drug overdose. There were no drugs in her system. She died due to dehydration. Given Palmer's, this becomes a big media story, right? Michelle is 15. Her parents are very vocal. This actually, number one, it destroys Palmer's program, but it finally, for the first time, these programs, a lot of which had proliferated as a result of Challenger's success, get some scrutiny, right? And as a result, the media reaches out to Steve Cartisano and to be like, hey, seems like this lady basically just does exactly what you do, and a kid died. Is there a danger a kid's going to die in your program? And Steve told them, at Challenger, a tragedy like the one that killed Michelle Sutton could never happen. You want to guess what happened 6 weeks later?
Oh, my God.
Exactly. Literally 2 months later, something like that. On June 23rd, 1990, Kristen Chase enrolled at Challenger. And in this sentence, the word enrolled means that she was taken in the dead of night by Challenger employees and driven from Florida to southern Utah. Kristen had been enrolled in the program by her mother, who, like most of these parents, thought her daughter was in danger and needed the tough love of a boot camp to set her on the right path. I think her parents are separated because her father, Ronald, claims he was not informed that Kristen had been forced into the program, right? Ronald is like, I knew she was in the program. I thought this was something kind of like Michelle that she wanted to do, which is not the case. So as soon as she arrives, the first thing they do is they starve kids, right? For the first 2 days that you're hiking, you don't eat any food, right? Now, in addition to the fact that she is being starved, Kristen grows up has lived her whole life at sea level. And these are 7,000 feet or more elevation mountains they're hiking in.
Oh, that will fuck you up.
That'll fuck you up hard if you don't acclimate. There, again, if you understand anything about the medicine behind this, there are ways to responsibly acclimatize people to that environment.
No, that's because when I went to my hippie boarding school, we were on a hill. That was, I think, about 6,000. We were up in the mountains, and I was always a little fucked up.
Yeah.
The first day back from vacation and a little fucked up coming back down to sea level, with my parents in, the valley in LA. You need time and you need electrolytes and you need to be very careful about what you eat and
you need
walking.
To not be starved for 2 days.
Exactly. Walking is exhausting. Just walking is exhausting at that altitude.
Yeah, a lawsuit from her father later noted that, quote, her medical history forwarded to Challenger by her mother indicated that Kristen suffered from bouts of coughing up blood, stomach pain, urinary burning in frequency, difficulty running, menstrual difficulty, and a knee injury. So in addition, if I am, and I'm not an expert on any of this, but I have some training in wilderness first aid, if I am working for an organization like this and a kid with this medical history wants to do a 63, I'm not letting them in. I'm sorry. Yeah. If you cough up blood regularly and we don't really have a clear idea as to why, you are not spending 2 months out in the desert in my wilderness program. That doesn't seem responsible, But they don't care over at Challenger. They're like, come on, cough up blood here in the mountains. It'll be good for you. So Horsehair and the other counselors force her to do a 6,000-foot elevation hike the day that she arrives. Again, they deprive her of food. Next, from a write-up in Deseret.com, quote, despite being upset, frightened, and ill, Kristen was forced to participate in 4 to 5 mile hikes each day, in temperatures exceeding 95 degrees. She was not given a proper physical exam or any conditioning activities prior to the hikes. The day before she died, Kristen Chase fell several times on one of the hikes, experienced knee pain, and showed symptoms of heat exhaustion. On the evening prior to her death, Kristen told one of the Challenger counselors that she was afraid of dying in the program. A counselor wrote on an evaluation form, Kristen's number one short-term goal is to get out of here safe and alive, the suit says. And maybe as the employee, you shouldn't be working for a company for like, well, this kid's goal is not to die here. I wonder if we're handling health and safety properly.
Yeah, it's that.
It's
yeah,
bleak.
there's some implications there.
Yeah, it's just incredibly bleak. Like this poor girl is like murdered by negligence.
Well,
but you know,
oh, sorry. Is it a time for a break?
It's time for an ad break. That's right. Terrible time for an ad break. But
yeah, I mean, I was just going to say quickly that the thing that messes like with my head is that I knew people who went to these places more than 10 years later.
Yeah, still the same.
Still the same.
Yeah. Yep. Speaking of which, our ads, the same as they ever were.
Almost 30 years together, 4 kids, and some of reality TV's most unforgettable moments, we know a thing or two about living life out loud. We're taking you behind the scenes in our new podcast, Between Us, with me, Heather Dubrow.
And me, Terry Dubrow. Between Us isn't about perfect lighting or curated Instagram grids.
It's the unfiltered, behind-closed-doors conversations you wish you could eavesdrop on. Equal parts smart, funny, and a little bit scandalous.
Every week, Heather will bring you an unapologetic take on the headlines, the trends, and the cultural moments everyone's texting about.
And Terry will deliver insider beauty, health, and wellness insights you won't find on TikTok.
Together, we'll tell the stories, spill the secrets, and share the hacks that keep life, marriage, and everything in between feeling fresh and fun.
We may live in a gated community, but there's zero gatekeeping here.
And plenty of, did they just say that moments?
Listen to Between Us on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Segregation in the day, integration at night.
When segregation was the law, one mysterious black club owner had his own rules.
We didn't worry about what went on outside. It was like stepping in another world.
Inside Charlie's place, black and white people danced together. But not everyone was happy about it.
You saw the KKK?
Yeah, they were dressed up in their uniform.
The KKK set out to raid Charlie, take him away from here.
Charlie was an example of power. They had to crush him.
From Atlas Obscura, Rococo Punch, and Visit Myrtle Beach comes Charlie's Place, a story that was nearly lost to time. Until now. Listen to Charlie's Place on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Anna Navarro, and on my new podcast, Bleep with Anna Navarro, I'm talking to the people closest to the biggest issues happening in your community and around the world. Because I know deep down inside right now, we are all cursing and asking what the bleep is going on. I'm talking to people like Julie K. Brown, who broke the explosive story on Jeffrey Epstein in 2018. These victims have been let down time and time again for decades and decades and decades by local law enforcement, by federal law enforcement, by administration after administration.
The Justice Department, through, I think we counted 4 presidential administrations, failed these victims.
Listen to Bleep with Anna Navarro as part of the My Cultura podcast network, available on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Usually on This Podcast Will Kill You, we talk about the diseases, infections, and biological threats that can make us really sick.
But right now, we're doing something a little different.
We're stepping back and looking at what the human body needs to keep going.
When you consider what we know about sleep in humans, there's one rule that comes out. We are predictably unpredictable sleepers.
We're talking about why sleep works the way it does, why our bodies don't follow neat rules, and why modern life makes rest so hard to come by.
The second half of our series takes us to the digestive system with a multi-part series on what happens after we eat. Okay, I just have to say that all of my favorite words apparently are digestive words.
Sphincter, peristalsis, duodenum. It's fascinating, it's funny, and it matters so much more than you think.
Episodes of our new series run from January 20th through February 17th, with new episodes every Tuesday on the Exactly Right Network.
Listen to This Podcast Will Kill You as part of the Exactly Right Network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Segregation in the day, integration at night.
When segregation was the law, one mysterious black club owner had his own rules.
We didn't worry about what went on outside. It was like stepping in another world.
Inside Charlie's place, Black and white people danced together. But not everyone was happy about it.
You saw the KKK?
Yeah, they was dressed up in their uniform.
The KKK set out to raid Charlie, take him away from here.
Charlie was an example of power. They had to crush him.
From Atlas Obscura, Rococo Punch, and Visit Myrtle Beach comes Charlie's Place. A story that was nearly lost to time. Until now. Listen to Charlie's Place on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
We're back. Okay, so on June 27th, Kristen was made to do another 5-mile hike. She started showing symptoms of heat exhaustion and eventually collapsed on the trail. Despite the fact that she had stopped breathing, Challenger employees did not call for a Care Flight helicopter to come in and rescue her. I don't know if it was literally the company Care Flight, but there's a company that did you could radio them and they would do emergency airlifts, right? Which if you are doing a service like this, if you're like a wilderness course like this, you want to have a contract with someone who can fly in no matter where you were and pick up an emergency case, right? Like that's part of the operating a business like Challenger responsibly. Challenger did not have an ongoing agreement with any of these services, and in fact refused to call them anyway because Steve hadn't paid the bill.
Oh,
and he was in what's described in the court case as an ongoing disagreement over an unpaid bill. So he had fucked this helicopter emergency service over so he could keep renting Lamborghinis, and he wouldn't let any of his employees call them even for an emergency. So eventually Challenger, instead of getting an actual medical helicopter in, they call for a tour helicopter that does helicopter tours of Bryce Canyon. Which does not reach, and again, by the time it reaches Kristen, she is very much dead. She was already not the odds were already kind of rough for her by the fact that she was not breathing in the wilderness, but the fact that it takes hours for a chopper to arrive, In the immediate wake of the disaster, Steve Cartisano started doing cable TV appearances, where he claimed that Chase's death had nothing to do with the Challenger program. And I'm going to quote again from Deseret News. She hadn't yet begun the 63-day expedition and was on a 4.5-mile day hike to explore some nearby caves and arches when she died. She could have walked over to Central Park and collapsed, Cartisano said on the Jane Wallace Show on the Lifetime TV channel. Her death, though heartrending, has not caused him to reevaluate his program. We've had too much success, Cartisano said, pointing out that over 750 youths have completed the program. Now, there's a lot that's bad about that. For one thing, they had absolutely started the 63-day expedition. There were days into it, and she had been forced to continue hiking despite repeatedly complaining that she was in physical distress. This is not a walking to, I don't know, maybe you've taken some hardcore hikes over to Central Park, but this is not like walking around in the park in the middle of a city. Now, surprisingly, Kristen's mother is one of the people who came out to support the Challenger team and Steve, even though they had killed her daughter. She told a reporter, "What we did for our daughter was the best thing we could have ever done. We felt this was the answer. I truly feel it would have been if she'd been able to complete it." It was not you killed her. It wasn't the best thing you could have done because she died.
I mean, I guess she just probably needed to... Yeah, I don't know. You need to justify the horrible things that happen.
It's such I don't know. I feel like it's such a fucking American response, particularly middle-class conservative response. I am not responsible for anything bad that happens. It is the world doing the wrong thing. Even if I do something that's dangerous and on its face, reckless, and on its face, something that any responsible person could have told me was a dangerous thing to do. I felt it was the right thing to do, which means it must have been. And so the fact that it ended badly, can't be my fault, right? It's this complete refusal to take any, it's fucking Iraq war syndrome, right? It should have worked. Fuck you people.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, what I wonder is how did they get these people on shows that were like, oh, the program worked for me. Where the fuck did they find those people? What I'm wondering about, because
I mean, there was probably incentive programs to get them to talk about
definitely incentives. I think there may have been a degree of like money getting, like who knows what Steve was doing behind the scenes with these people, but also some number of kids probably did feel like the program helped, right?
There was a different Netflix documentary, I forget the name of it, but one of the things that they talked about was that there was like specific parent incentive programs for recruiting parents to send their children to places and to spread good word and speak highly about it. Yep. That was a thing that happened.
And you have within these programs, you've got a bunch of kids. There are kind of hierarchies within the kids. Some of those kids you just have like helping out. You give them extra privileges and whatnot. And they kind of, you're kind of almost in a lot of cases weaponizing the kids who are the biggest bullies, right? Having them bully the other kids to keep them in line. And maybe those kids wind up feeling like, well, I have a lot of power and agency in this situation that I don't back at home. So it is a positive experience because they're getting to be shitty to some of the other kids, right?
Right.
A variety of things are happening here, but like I think one of the villains here is like the willingness of daytime TV to like, well, we're never going to actually do any research on how these programs should operate or how they do operate. But this charismatic guy, Steve, we'll have him and a couple of teenagers on, like we'll talk to them about this thing and effectively give him free advertising, which is kind of all TV ever does in these cases.
I think that there's also I know that there's the Cash for Kids thing, and I knew a girl who almost ended up in one of these programs, but because a psychiatrist suggested to her father that she should go. And after that, this girl was somebody with a lot of issues, but she refused to go to a psychiatrist after that because she was so afraid that one would try to send her away.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's shit like there's that fucking CIA program in Pakistan where they like pretended to be vaccinating people in order to like blood test them to try and find bin Laden. And it's like, when you do shit like that, people are going to think vaccines are a scam.
Yeah.
Right?
People aren't going to be particularly happy. Yeah.
Thanks, the CIA. So I know I want to know, we just talked about Sharon, who I do not like very much, being like, this really was the best thing for I know she died, but it's the best thing for my daughter. I gotta say, I don't know much about her relationship with her former husband, Ronald, but I'm gonna guess he was in the right side of that breakup, because when he finds out about this, he was like, what the fuck did you do? You sent our daughter to die in the desert, and now you're defending the people who got her killed on television? So one of the things that came out as a result of all this is that she had not told him, and she shared custody with him, that she had their daughter kidnapped, that she was not there willingly. Ronald gets very angry about all this, and he is made by a court the representative of his daughter's estate by a state judge, and in this capacity, he sues the ever-loving shit out of the Challenger program. Cartisano is charged with 8 counts of child abuse and a misdemeanor for his involvement in Chase's death. Now, the good news is that Chase does win a bunch of money as a result of this lawsuit. The bad news is that Cartisano does not wind up with any criminal convictions because they fuck up the case. There's a weirdly shitty judge due to a series of at one point in the court, or the first time they try this case, it gets thrown out because the judge forgets to read the charges to the jury at the onset of the trial. There are a couple of more things like that, and Cartisano is eventually acquitted, but his company winds up more than $1 million in debt, and he has to file for Chapter 11. Several more lawsuits follow from other children after this, all of which are settled out of court by the end of 1993. Cartisano is banned from ever running a similar program in the state of Utah again. So that's good. Steve Cartisano, he's out of the picture. He's surely not going to come back later in this story, running a series of wilderness survival camps. Let's talk about what happens in Utah after this point, because the fact that Utah has gone after Cartisano to some extent doesn't mean that they have any interest in regulating what has become a multi-million-dollar industry in the state. When local and national media covered Kristen's death, they needed an expert to reach out to and to get quotes about what had gone wrong in Steve's program. Many of them picked Larry Olson, who, despite the negligent deaths of 2 students in his programs, was still held up as the good guy of the wilderness therapy industry. In an interview with the Salt Lake Tribune, he displayed particular disgust for Steve's boot camp model. You don't treat them like maggots, you treat them like human beings. Which is a good thing to be said. I just don't trust you at all, Larry.
Yeah.
Now, whenever something terrible happens in a program like Challenger, there's an urge in the media to minimize issues in the rest of the industry, especially if that business, tough love care for troubled teens, is one that mainstream culture just sort of assumes is necessary. As a result, the focus was on how Challenger was a poorly run program, and not the idea that the whole concept might be a bad idea, right? 2 former Challenger employees, Bill Henry and Lance Jagger, our man Horsehair, had testified against Steve in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Can you believe Horsehair rolled on Steve?
Horsehair.
Horsehair, you fucked over Steve Montana. How could you? So Horsehair and his buddy Bill are still clear to operate a wilderness rehab survival camp thing in Utah. And now there's an opening in the market because Challenger is no longer accepting anybody. And so in 1992, they launch a company, North Star Expeditions. That's a nice name. Makes it sound very adventurous.
It sounds like a cruise that
It does.
Like
it
a
does.
vacation
Grandma goes
camp.
on.
Yeah, it sounds like it does sound like a cruise. Given that the company was owned and operated by men trained by Steve Cartisano, who had played a direct role in the death of Kristen Chase, you probably won't be surprised to hear that they almost immediately got another child killed. In early March 1994, about a year after they start doing this, Aaron Bacon enrolled in North Star's, again, 63-day wilderness program. They all are the same length. Bacon is one of these kids who had been a good student most of his academic career, but got into pot in his sophomore year and started missing classes. In February, he was in a fight with some kid. And the media, the local news reports that came out after this, all just said he was in a fight with the Crips. And I don't know if he was in a fight with the real Crips or there were some other kids in his school calling themselves the Crips, which I think is likelier.
That's like every time people talk about gangs, it's like, are you guys talking about organized crime or are you talking about like a group of kids that,
We definitely had some kids in my middle school who called themselves Bloods, and I do not think they were affiliated with the criminal organization.
You have these like 13-year-olds who will like in LA who will tag like MS-13 on something.
Yeah.
And it's like, you guys, you're not.
I don't quite know if this
MS-13. MS-13 tagging that on a locker, that's
that's a big part of their operation.
Oh yeah,
that's if you want to move some serious crystal, you got to have lockers in every state.
Oh yeah.
So, his parents get convinced that he is in a downward spiral that's going to end with him murdered in a gang war. Now, in his article for Outside, John Krakauer describes how Aaron Bacon's mom found out about North Star. Students at North Star learn that Mother Nature does not make exceptions, explained the outfit's brochure. They learn responsibility, self-discipline, motivation. Tuition was $13,900 for a 63-day course, plus another $775 to have Aaron forcibly escorted to Escalante, something North Star strongly recommended. Bob's architecture firm, that's his dad, once prosperous, had lately been teetering on the brink of insolvency, and the Bacons no longer had that kind of cash. But, says Sally, his mom, after talking to several parents whose kids had been helped by the program, we were given a lot of hope that North Star was going to build Aaron's self-esteem. I knew it would be rigorous, but I pictured him out there with God and nature, hiking all day, discussing his issues with therapists around the campfire at night. Just a totally fanciful idea of what was actually going on here. None of these counselors are therapists. None of them have relevant training in this. They're not even like any kind of teacher. Now, it's unclear to me, do Sally and Bob know that? But they are aware of some of this because several days into his time with North Star, Aaron sends a letter back to his parents and writes, I'm trying to work this program as well as I can, but I can't believe you want me believing this stuff. I've been told that all therapists, counselors, psychologists, and psychiatrists are quacks. I've been lectured on the stupidity of believing in them. I miss you, Mom and Dad. And maybe that's a sign that your kid's not going to get good therapy
Yeah.
at the wilderness camp. That's teaching him that psychiatrists are liars. You've got to trust only horsehair knows how to be an adult. Great stuff. So prior to handing their child off to strangers, the only concerns Bob and Sally had expressed to North Star was that their son was very thin, and they worried that he wouldn't be provided enough food. Our old pal Horsehair assured them he would never let a student lose weight during one of their sessions. For 3 weeks after Aaron was taken away in the night, his mom called regularly to check up on him. She was told that her son was a whiner, malingering, pretending to be sick, and doing so badly at the program that they might have no choice but to have him repeat it. The other kids, the counselor said, were angry at Aaron for slowing them down. Now, the reality of what's happening here is that for the first 2 days that they're on these hikes, Aaron and his classmates are starved. North Star claimed that this was to cleanse the toxins out of them. Aaron, very thin already, hiking and not eating, grew very quickly ill. Then he fell and injured himself badly enough that a week or so in, he was unable to hike with his backpack and left it behind. His counselors were like, well, you left your backpack behind. That's where your food was. You don't get to eat now. So he spends another 2 days without food. He gets even sicker. Because he was clearly ill and slow, he became the subject of mockery, with counselors calling him homosexual, and in one case, taking his sleeping bag away as punishment. In a letter to his parents, Aaron wrote, I feel like I am losing control of my body. I've peed my pants every night for the past 3 nights, and tonight when we started our little hike, I took a dump in my pants. I didn't even feel it coming. It just happened. All the other students started to laugh. I've been telling the staff that I'm sick for a while, and they say I'm faking it. Now again, if you were to tell those symptoms to anyone with fairly minimal medical training, those are signs of serious illness, right? When a theoretically healthy young teenager loses control of their bladder and bowels during extreme physical exertion, that means something is very wrong, and you need to get them to a hospital immediately, right? Nothing is done. On March 30th, 3 weeks into his trek, Aaron's mom called the school, which warned her that he might need to repeat the program because he was doing so badly. The next day, they called to inform her that her son was dead due to a perforated ulcer that leaked through his small intestine and caused a massive fatal infection. North Star insisted they had done nothing wrong. Aaron had just been sick. The ulcer had been there anyway. Nothing they did could have prevented his death. But then Sally saw her son's body. Here's how she described it. Quote, his legs were like toothpicks. His hip bones stuck way out. His ribs, he looked like, again, a concentration camp victim. There were bruises from the tip of his toes to the top of his head, open sores up and down the inside of his thighs. The only way we were even able to recognize him was a childhood scar above his right eye.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Man.
This seems like a good time to go to ads.
Almost 30 years together, 4 kids, and some of reality TV's most unforgettable moments, we know a thing or two about living life out loud. We're taking you behind the scenes in our new podcast, Between Us, with me, Heather Dubrow.
And me, Terry Dubrow. Between Us isn't about perfect lighting or curated Instagram grids.
It's the unfiltered, behind-closed-doors conversations you wish you could eavesdrop on. Equal parts smart, funny, and a little bit scandalous.
Every week, Heather will bring you an unapologetic take on the headlines, the trends, and the cultural moments everyone's texting about.
And Terry will deliver insider beauty, health, and wellness insights you won't find on TikTok.
Together, we'll tell the stories, spill the secrets, and share the hacks that keep life, marriage, and everything in between feeling fresh and fun.
We may live in a gated community, but there's zero gatekeeping here.
And plenty of, did they just say that moments?
Listen to Between Us on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Segregation in the day, integration at night.
When segregation was the law, one mysterious Black club owner had his own rules.
We didn't worry about what went on outside. It was like stepping in another world.
Inside Charlie's place, Black and white people danced together. But not everyone was happy about it.
You saw the KKK?
Yeah, they was dressed up in their uniform.
The KKK set out to raid Charlie, take him away from here.
Charlie was an example of power. They had to crush him.
From Atlas Obscura, Rococo Punch, and Visit Myrtle Beach comes Charlie's Place. A story that was nearly lost to time. Until now. Listen to Charlie's Place on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Anna Navarro, and on my new podcast, Bleep with Anna Navarro, I'm talking to the people closest to the biggest issues happening in your community and around the world. Because I know deep down inside right now, we are all cursing and asking, what the bleep is going on? I'm talking to people like Julie K. Brown, who broke the explosive story on Jeffrey Epstein in 2018. These victims have been let down time and time again for decades and decades and decades by local law enforcement, by federal law enforcement, by administration after administration.
The Justice Department, through, I think we counted 4 presidential administrations, failed these victims.
Listen to Bleep with Anna Navarro as part of the My Cultura podcast network, available on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Usually on This Podcast Will Kill You, we talk about the diseases, infections, and biological threats that can make us really sick.
But right now, we're doing something a little different.
We're stepping back and looking at what the human body needs to keep going.
When you consider what we know about sleep in humans, there's one rule that comes out. We are predictably unpredictable sleepers.
We're talking about why sleep works the way it does, why our bodies don't follow neat rules, and why modern life makes rest so hard to come by.
The second half of our series takes us to the digestive system with a multi-part series on what happens after we eat. Okay, I just have to say that all of my favorite words apparently are digestive words.
Sphincter, peristalsis, duodenum. It's fascinating, it's funny, and it matters so much more than you think.
Episodes of our new series run from January 20th through February 17th, with new episodes every Tuesday on the Exactly Right Network.
Listen to This Podcast Will Kill You as part of the Exactly Right Network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Segregation in the day, integration at night.
When segregation was the law, one mysterious Black club owner had his own rules.
We didn't worry about what went on outside. It was like stepping in another world.
Inside Charlie's Place, Black and white people danced together. But not everyone was happy about it.
You saw the KKK?
Yeah, they was dressed up in their uniform.
The KKK set out to raid Charlie, take him away from here.
Charlie was an example of power. They had to crush him.
From Atlas Obscura, Rococo Punch, and Visit Myrtle Beach comes Charlie's Place, a story that was nearly lost to time. Until now. Listen to Charlie's Place on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And we're back. So that's fucking bleak. And like adjacent to murder, I think negligence this bad, like I don't really see much of a difference between this and just like killing a kid, right?
Yeah,
like purposefully.
It really is. I mean, I do know that like the humiliation there is just kind of, it's just part of it.
Oh, it's a nightmare. That kid was in hell the last days of his life.
Exactly. Yeah. You're and yeah, they do make it seem like these kids are all manipulative, you know.
Yeah.
But
again,
I mean,
his crime was he smoked weed.
Right.
Great parenting, by the way, from Bob and Sally there. I don't want to shit on them too much because their kid died, but also you're part of the reason why. So I don't really feel all that.
I think like there's got to be like I know they must like the way that they do it, because I know people who had terrible parents who were sent to these programs, but I also know people who had very loving, caring parents who sent their kids to these programs that if they knew, they never would. So I think all the money in this goes into sales.
Yeah, it goes into sales. It goes into like making this, and you also have the cultural inertia is with you, right? The weight of, well, obviously kids these days are worse than they've ever been, right? Which is a big thing in the media. Obviously, the consequences of kids getting into drugs are so dire. Obviously, tough love is the only thing that works, right? Like all of these things together, you're doing most of the ad work for these companies. All they need to do is come in and say, you know, will give your kid this kind of like, you would imagine hiking through the desert, sharing wisdom with your, probably will kind of insinuate Native American counselors. They'll learn all sorts of ancient wisdom, right? Like that's literally how the ad campaigns work for this. A lot of them, the money is in like, we know these different Native techniques for like providing therapy too, right? Like there's all sorts of bullshit stacked on.
I think there's a religious element underneath it all.
Yep.
I think, but the thing is, like, I know somebody who went into this program and said that they came out believing in God, but only because they felt like they had to in a way, because it was like they
self-defense.
It was basically they were like, I feel like right now the only thing that's giving me hope is the idea of a God, and the
That
only
makes sense
thing,
too.
and so, and it feels like it is like when some people who come out of traumatic experiences lose their faith, but some people, they gain it because they're like, God was the only, thing that I could think of. And I was praying to God to let me go through this, and let me get through this alive.
Yeah, because you need to, especially as a child, your degree of context, your understanding of like what are your degree of power in any situation is so little. Like that, I get how that might be psychologically necessary. Like some people, like that's just what's going to get you through
exactly.
it. Yeah.
That's what's going to get them through. And I mean, you're probably also like you can hallucinate really easily after the desert. So probably that that also has something to do with it too.
Yes.
Starvation and heat exhaustion can make you see some things.
It'll fuck you up.
It will fuck you up.
That's why we're offering like a special camp where we're just going to take you out into the desert until you hallucinate. It's nice. It's legal. We may mix a little bit of peyote into the water. It's not really peyote. I got it off of Facebook, but it's got mushrooms on the side of the bottle. So that's got to be good enough for you, Come
Something
hallucinate in the desert with me. Yeah, exactly. Something will happen. And don't worry, I know what dehydration looks like. So one thing you'll notice from all of the stories of kids who have died in these programs is that while the child who died was obviously ill and in very clear need of medical attention, they were attacked by staff for faking it, for having a bad attitude, for trying to get out of the program, for being manipulative. All of this traces back to Steve Cartisano. Remember, trained all of these people in running these other facilities. All of these deaths are people linked directly to Steve. In an interview earlier in his career with Challenger, Steve told a reporter, "We are breaking down facades. Kids come in with all sorts of little ways to manipulate, with a lot of anger. We physically stress them out, and that breaks down the facades to get to their heart." So again, the training that Steve established is you have to physically stress these children to break down the barriers between them and healing. So really, by ignoring when this kid starts shitting blood in the desert, we're doing the best thing for him. He's just trying to manipulate us by losing control of his bowels.
Even the kids I know who did who didn't necessarily suffer physical effects from it. Although, I mean, they all did because they all were, lack of food and lack of sleep.
Right.
But, and exposure to the elements, but they were all humiliated. They were made to eat dirt. If, people were made to people were forced to be nude or pee in front of each other, wet themselves as punishments, things like that. In addition to being yelled at, but humiliation was a big one. Humiliation in front of a group of people.
And it's the kind of thing, it shows you how it's just the primary difference in toxicity between the programs that Larry Olson is running, which are very much imperfect, but don't do this to kids. The deaths there are, I think, generally due to irresponsibility, but they're not torturing kids the same way. One of the things that the Anasazi camp that he runs afterwards will do is that you get 2,000 calories a day. Now they do have this weird rule where if you eat your food early, you have to catch animals and forage and whatnot to fill up the gap in but none of their kids ever starved to death. So I guess they probably did it right. And I think the key thing is that aspects of that were well, you have to manage the amount of food that you have. You're on a hike for a while. This is part of learning wilderness survival. If you're not pairing that with, and all of the kids are going to yell at you and make fun of you, and the counselors will beat you and call you gay, then it's not necessarily a bad, as long as there's a certain degree of medical training present, not necessarily a bad experience, right? It can be useful to learn things about like managing calories when you're out in the wild. That's not what's going on in these places, right? After Chase's death in 1990, Utah had forced through its first serious regulations for wilderness therapy. Most of these focused on what kids couldn't be made to do. There were restrictions. You can't have a kid hike up with a pack that's above a certain percentage of their body weight. You have to give kids a set number of calories per day. But as Krakauer noted in 1995, responsibility for enforcing these regulations fell to a lone civil servant, Ken Stetler, who was supposed to monitor more than 100 youth treatment companies statewide. In practice, it was impossible for him to ride herd on so many programs, and North Star was among those that escaped close scrutiny. Stetler, a devoted Mormon, knew Jagger and Henry well and says that he trusted them as fellow saints implicitly. After Bacon's death, Stetler's confidence in Jagger and Henry remained steadfast. He quickly cleared North Star of any wrongdoing and allowed the program to stay in business, which it did for 6 months until the state of Utah filed criminal charges in October 1994. So again, the guy when they decide to regulate this after 2 kids die, the guy who does it is like, well, it's Mormons running this camp. Mormons would never put a kid in danger.
Right.
Oh, the kid died. Must not have been their fault, you know? Thankfully,
Right.
the Bacon's parents make enough of a problem that the state of Utah does something, but like they almost didn't, you know? And again, yeah.
It is really, I don't know, the idea of like, yeah, of like, well, nobody in this group would be a bad
Right.
person.
Mormons
like,
would never
that's
do
just-
this. Yeah.
Yeah. That's just like, it's such a strange idea to me. Like that, well, yeah, of course they wouldn't do that.
It's this thing we can all, it's easy to see what a bad idea that is, right? When you're thinking about like, well, I'm not a Mormon. I know a lot of bad things about the church of like about the Mormon church, right? Like the LDS church has a dark history. Churches in general often have dark histories of child abuse. I'm not surprised that stuff like this happens, but we all have our groups where we're like, well, no one in this group would ever abuse a kid, right? That's how kids keep getting abused. Like everyone has different groups. That's why you always need some sort of oversight that is not the group itself, making sure when you're dealing with like organizations that take care of kids, making sure kids aren't getting molested, because there is no group that will not include some child molesters in it.
No, it's sociology 101, you know.
Yeah.
Everybody's always like it's social ties are the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's why some people will be like, you know, I can't believe this famous person is standing with this abuser. And it's like, well, I mean, it's not a good thing that they're doing it, but probably they have close social ties with them.
Yeah.
And it's really hard for people to cut off social ties sometimes. I'm not saying it's a good thing, because it's not, but it explains.
Yeah. And this is specifically why you don't leave it up to random people.
Yeah.
It's why you build robust organizations that's job is to like not take it as read that people aren't abusing kids, right?
Yeah,
and to be an
people-
advocate for those kids.
Yeah, people on the outside who can be objective about it, because you get this sort of like I mean, this is, and obviously this isn't just like a Latter-day Saints thing. Like this is in every religion and every institution. There's some kind of old boy network. There's some kind of, you know, well, this guy is my friend. He would never do that.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about like cases of like film sets and stuff like that, especially back in the day, that were abusive to like child actors. And there's always the question of like, well, what did other actors on the set know at the time? But the bigger problem is that like, well, it shouldn't have been up to them either. Like there should be, again, professional agencies that's job is to do this, so that you're not trusting that everyone's going to, like, you can't just trust that everyone involved in the organization is going to be the best version of themselves. You assume that that people are going to be cowards. You assume that people are going to be sneaky, and you build a system that does not like take that for granted.
I think a lot of us who didn't have bad experiences on film sets, because I mostly had good experiences on film sets, but it was because we had people in our lives, like our parents and studio teachers, who always advocated for us, who always made sure that we weren't doing anything unsafe, and who would take us aside and say, hey, are you sure about this? Do you really want to be doing this? Do you feel safe about this? But obviously that's not the case everywhere.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. You have these people who are advocating, and these people who are a little bit outside of this, you know, and yeah, you do. You need the outside the outside eye, the outside perspective. You need the checks and balances.
Yeah, it's the Boy Scout shit, right? Like I had a great time in the Boy Scouts while a bunch of kids were getting molested. You know?
Yeah.
Like you just can't. You just never. You shouldn't leave it up to people whose expertise is not sniffing out child abuse to try and figure out if that's happening. You know, we keep learning this. Schools learn this lesson all the time. You know. I can't believe this teacher was doing that. You know, they were the cool teacher. Like, well, we all had a cool teacher who was doing something they shouldn't have been doing.
Well, that's the thing, too, is when people say to me, like, so many children are abused in Hollywood, I say, yes, but children were abused at nearly
let's talk
every
about
school.
The Catholic Church.
Yeah, the children. Well, and that's what I say to them. I say, this is not a problem that's unique to Hollywood. It's a problem that is in every institution where somebody has extreme power over anybody else. And maybe that's my anarchist streak talking, but I think that it's, any kind of institution.
I obviously agree with you 100%. I feel the same way when people obsess, not that it's not like the Epstein was not worth, like, certainly at one point when his crimes were being ignored, a lot more attention was needed. But the obsessional focus on this idea of like teenage and like child girl victims, as opposed to how the vast majority of child sex trafficking looks, which is people's parents and relatives primarily doing it, right? And is mostly kids who are poor and like don't intersect. They're also the people who are abusing them are poor. And so there's not this angle of like, this is the wealthy and powerful engaging in these horrible things. It's like, no, these are like poor adults abusing poor children. And like, that doesn't get any kind of attention, right? And even though it's a much more common version of the problem.
Yeah, I think also if somebody has complete control over you and complete control over what you're doing, and, in Hollywood, they have complete control over your dreams and your future. Yeah. That says something. In a church, they have complete, in any kind of religious institution, over your soul, those are very big things. And, if it's your mother, your father, your grandfather, your stepfather doing it, like your grandparents, like, these are the people that you're supposed to love and look up to. So, yeah.
And that takes us back to these facilities, this idea that like the parent or guardian of a child should have absolute power over them. No, they shouldn't.
Yeah.
Again, where do we draw that line is a question a society should ask itself. But like, you shouldn't trust parents to control children either, to a degree of totality,
Yeah, I mean, like, a lot of times there might be, like, an aunt or an uncle who's nearby who's like, hey, is stuff going on here okay? Like, things like that. There's got to be some kind of checks and balances, and we don't have that because
It's hard, and so we just don't do it.
Ironically, we are not. We talk about being very family oriented, but we're not really. Like, we're family oriented in a one interpretation of family, but not in a extended community, extended family, extended, respect. I don't know. That's a whole other topic. But
there's a lot to say about like our attitudes toward. I think a lot of this toxicity comes back to the Roman Empire. If I can go back to Rome, because back in the Roman Empire, there was this understanding that like you were legally a child as long as your father was still alive, right? And he could kill you. They have parents had the ability, specifically the paterfamilias, had technically the legal ability to execute his children. And I think there's a surprising number of people who think that should more or less still be the law. Certainly the way that a lot of parents treat their gay and trans kids makes me think that like, oh, so that idea is still kicking around in a lot of heads, huh? Yeah.
Or you need to break your child.
Or you got to break your kid down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've just talked about what Steve's people did after he left the state of Utah. And I know that I sneakily said Steve was gone from the story now, but surprise, Mara, Steve has a postscript. He's got a third
cockroach. Cockroach.
Yeah. Oh boy. He has like 3 more acts here. So for his own sake, Steve did not take the fact that he was no longer allowed to operate a wilderness therapy camp in Utah lying down. He moved to Hawaii in 1990, where he started to run a child treatment facility without a license. A write-up in the New York Times notes, Thomas D. Farrell, the deputy district attorney who sought the injunction to close the operation, said he interviewed the children who were removed from the Molokai program, and every damn one of them, he said, told officials that camp counselors physically abused them. So that's great. I'm sure that's the end of Steve's career, right? How many more times could the government get involved with you abusing children in your camps? And a couple of years later, he got caught operating another facility, this time in the U.S. Virgin Islands, again without a license. He was shut down again. But several months later, 2 boys escaped from another facility he was running in Costa Rica and told parents that they had been imprisoned and physically abused.
Is this where, like, they start going to, because like then you had these ones, wasn't there like a school? It wasn't a wilderness program, but there was like a school, I think, in Guantanamo Bay or no, Tranquility Bay. There was
no. Puerto Rico.
Okay.
He operates at 1994. He operates a camp in Puerto Rico. And this camp gets busted because he's operating it under a false name. This camp gets busted because local law enforcement finds like a cop finds like a car parked kind of in the woods and finds 5 boys tied up with rope in the back of the car with nooses around their necks.
Jesus. Oh my God.
So the cops are like, what's going on here, kids? And the kids are like, well, we're in this wilderness camp and they're disciplining us. And the cops are like, this doesn't seem like something you should legally be allowed to do to children. We're taking you in. And so they look into the matter, and it turns out that counselors had gotten fed up with these boys and left them tied in the back of a car because they didn't want to like do a hike or something. Steve and his program were charged with child abuse yet again, but they bounced before being served. Frustrated by the fact that he kept getting caught, Steve was by this point using a fake name in order to operate his businesses. When he was asked about this by the New York Times, he told them that he had to use an alias now just to stay in business and feed my family. That article goes on to tell the story of Christopher Humble, who was enrolled by his mother in an outdoor therapy program in Samoa after finding an advertisement for something called the Pacific Coast Academy. His mother talked on the phone with their head marketer, Stephen Michaels, who was really Steve Cartisano. The man has quite an imagination, but he cannot fathom having a name that isn't Steve. Oh, man, I don't know why, but that's quite funny.
Yeah, Steve Michaels.
Here's the New York Times again.
Turned his back on his Italian heritage this time.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. Really threw that away. Yeah. And threw away his Montana heritage, too. Tragic. Quote, Mr. Michaels, she recalled, told her that her son would receive proper care as well as stern discipline at the Academy's camp on the South Pacific island of Samoa. Persuaded by his promises, Miss Humble enrolled her son, Christopher, in a 1-year program for $20,000. Christopher lasted 6 months. When he returned home in December 1999, Miss Humble said his weight had dropped to 118 pounds from 165. He had scars from beatings, and he could barely walk or talk. So, it always ends the same way. All of these camps work the same way, which at this point, the first one, I might be like, well, maybe you were just so negligent that you let this happen. We're now 4 camps in. This is how you want them to operate, right? Yeah. Like, that's clear to everyone, I think. Now, the Times notes in that article that over his 12-year career up to that point, Steve had been accused of fraud and abuse at every single camp he operated. His Samoan program lasted just 3 years before more than a dozen children made reports of physical abuse. One teenager claimed to have been molested by multiple camp counselors, all of whom had been hired by Cartisano. When confronted about all of this by the Times, Steve defended himself by arguing that the children were all habitual liars whose parents just wanted refunds. He would argue that only 25 of the 1,200 children who'd attended his camps were even complaining, a number that was blatantly untrue even at the time. When asked about the numerous allegations of abuse by his students, Steve told the Times, "All of them are unfounded. All of them. Exaggerations. It never happened. These kids were no angels to begin with, and they would say anything to get sent home." So, hey, we get it. They were no angels. Hey!
I was going to say, no angel. There you go.
Steve shaking hands with every cop in the country.
Like, it's the thing. I mean, the thing is, like, also, I can only imagine how many of these children were sexually assaulted, but were too terrified
Never said
to say anything about it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
If you come home unable to speak, you're not going to be able to say, this person did something to me.
It also, it takes a lot of trust as anyone to talk about that. And if your parents have just paid for you to be abducted for a year, maybe you don't trust them anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Might not
that's
be
the thing,
smart
too.
to trust them after that.
Well, these places also ruin families because of that, too, because even parents who were taken in, who were, think about this, they're going to be the subject of a lot of hate and resentment. For the rest of
Understandably
these
so.
kids. Understandably
Yeah.
so, for the rest of these
Yeah.
kids' lives.
Don't send your kids to these programs, parents. You know? Anyway. So now I will say this about Steve. He seems to have, he was a customer as well as a purveyor of these services, because he sent both of his kids, I think, to these programs. He definitely sent his son David, who developed a drug problem, paid for him to be kidnapped and taken to a wilderness camp. Now, I don't know much about David, but the documentary that came out recently, Steve's wife says that David is in prison at the time the documentary was formed. So I'm going to guess not great. The tough love didn't work here. Steve Cartisano died of a heart attack in 2019. He left behind a massive industry largely formed in his image, as this paragraph from an article in Rolling Stone makes clear. His wilderness camp set the foundation for thousands of other programs. More than 120,000 children live in troubled teen facilities, which include wilderness programs. Training standards fluctuate drastically from organization to organization, and in 2005, the U.S. Government Accountability Office recorded more than 1,500 employees involved in litigation for abuse in 33 states. And from 2018 to 2021, 13 people were fired or resigned from youth treatment centers in Utah due to sexual behavior and sexual assault allegations, according to a 2022 investigation by the Salt Lake Tribune. So
there was a TV show about wilderness camps. I remember that in like the 2000s. I called Brat Camp or something like that.
Brat Camp.
Yeah,
Great.
that was like they had like a moment, when Dr. Phil is sending them away to everybody.
Yeah, let's see if we can get some good TV out of this.
Yeah. And considering that they're, for it had been more than it'd been 10 or 15 years and these children had been dying. It's like, that's the thing that just drives me up the wall, is that these places still existed. They still, there was no oversight, that these places were able to get even bigger.
Yeah.
In the 2000s and in 2010s. And now finally, are being shut down, but are probably going to spring up other places. Yeah,
I'm sure they'll have another renaissance at some point. At least 16 children have died in these facilities since 1990. Thousands more have suffered injury and trauma. As you noted, attempts to reform the industry or even develop a comprehensive understanding of its harm have been uneven at best. I found an article by the BBC that summarizes the U.S. Government Accountability Office report in 2007, which, quote, found it difficult to grasp the national picture due to irregular licensing rules at the state level and ambiguity surrounding the labels facilities used to describe themselves, like boot camps or therapeutic boarding schools. Still, the investigators found thousands of allegations of abuse and several deaths at programs like this around the United States and in U.S.-owned businesses. Basically, we found huge numbers of allegations of physical, sexual abuse. We found a number of deaths, but there's so little standardization in even what these places are called that it's impossible to get the kind of data that you would want to have for programs like this. I can't say there's no evidence they fucking work, right? As a result of how decentralized all of this is, about how difficult it is to kind of even find out what's going on, it's been left to the parents of dead kids and to adult survivors of these programs to try and force accountability. Cynthia Clark Harvey is one of the former. Her daughter Erica died of dehydration and heat stroke one day into a Nevada program in 2002. Cynthia had done her homework in trying to pick a place for her daughter, and by 2002 there were state licensing requirements. So she thought, this place is licensed by the state, it's accredited, they have a good reputation, this should be safe. And then, quote, after weeks of deliberation and planning, they traveled to Nevada under the guise of a family trip with her younger sister. When the deception was revealed, Erica became scared and angry and refused to get out of the car. After a turbulent hours-long group therapy session with other families, she and the other children were taken away. This was the last time Cynthia and her husband ever saw their daughter alive. By the time they got back home to Arizona the following evening, there was already a message waiting on their answering phone, telling them to call. They were told Erica had an accident and staff were performing CPR. So Cynthia wound up testifying to Congress about what had happened to her daughter, and she's been joined in her advocacy by a number of celebrity survivors of these programs, most famous among them Paris Hilton, who has funded a significant amount of advocacy and documentary journalism to try to bring this industry to an end. It's taken a long time, but the work of these survivors and parents has borne fruit, as this article in the Salt Lake Tribune makes clear. Legislators enacted more regulations in 2021 in response to increased scrutiny in recent years of youth treatment programs amid allegations of mistreatment and abuse. The legislation placed limits on the use of restraints for all programs and addressed the use of drugs in isolation rooms in residential centers. It also earmarked more money to hire more state regulators who now go into youth treatment programs more often, and it requires programs to report when a staff member used a physical restraint on a young person or puts them in seclusion. Perhaps the greatest damage has been done to the reputation of the industry as a whole, and that may ultimately be the thing that actually does more to kill it than any of these regulations, right? Is the fact that at this point, the sheer weight and celebrity has helped with this of attention on this has given it a black eye. In 2023, nearly half of Utah's wilderness camps shut down. The ones that remain are hosting only a fraction of their full capacity. So as you've said, we can be hopeful that this thing is dying out, but someone will come along with something else at some point.
I think that letting parents know, and letting people know what these places really are and what they actually do, I do think is because obviously trying to get oversight through, any other means doesn't seem to be really working. And I think that really just sort of spreading the word is probably the best that, they can do.
Yeah.
And, that helped shut down some of the places like this that were actually schools, if something has a bad enough reputation, sometimes that sort of, starves it of oxygen and,
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know. I think that that's one of the best things, one of the only things really that can happen. And yeah, you're right. Probably something else that's just as shitty might take its place. But yeah, hopefully these places will not be around much longer.
Yeah. I think that's as good a note to end on as any. Mara Wilson. Mara, your memoir, Where Am I Now? Out in stores, available on the internet, being beamed into space to be listened to by our coming alien overlords so that they can understand human culture. Congratulations on that contract, by the way. That's a big one. Anything else you wanna plug before we roll out?
Yeah, I've been writing articles for The Guardian about psychology and wellness, and I've been doing a lot of audiobook narration these days. I love doing it. Voiceover and audiobooks or narration are like my favorite thing. You can find a lot of those books on Libro.fm. And also, I wrote another short memoir called Good Girls Don't, which is about being a pissed off people pleaser. And that is available on what was formerly known as Scribd, and I believe is now called Everand. So yeah,
check out. Did they change Scribd? Okay.
I think they did. Yeah, I think they did. And so yeah, check out Where Am I Now and Good Girls Don't.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mara. You've been wonderful. And you listeners have also been wonderful listening to these horrible stories of terrible things. Go hug a kitten or, again, drive to the corporate offices of...
No. Absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
Behind the Bastards is a production of Cool Zone Media. For more from Cool Zone Media, visit our website, coolzonemedia.com, or check us out on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Behind the Bastards is now available on YouTube. New episodes every Wednesday and Friday. Subscribe to our channel, youtube.com/@BehindTheBastards.
Hi, listeners. I'm Anna Sinfield, the host of The Girlfriend Spotlight, and I've got some great interviews coming your way. I'm also excited to tell you that you can now get access to all episodes of season 1, 2, 3, and 4 of The Girlfriends, and every single episode of The Girlfriend Spotlight 100% ad-free, and 1 week early through the iHeart True Crime Plus subscription, available exclusively on Apple Podcasts.
Plus, you'll get access to other chart-topping true crime shows you love, like Betrayal, Paper Ghosts, Piketon Massacre, The Brothers Ortiz, What Happened in Nashville, Hell and Gone, The Godmother, and more. So don't wait. Head to Apple Podcasts, search for iHeart True Crime Plus, and subscribe today.
This is Ryder Strong, and I have a new podcast called The Red Weather. In 1995, my neighbor, Anna Trainer, disappeared from a commune.
It was nature and trees and praying and drugs.
So no, I am not your guru.
And back then, I lied to everybody.
They have had this case for 30 years.
I'm going back to my hometown to uncover the truth. Listen to The Red Weather on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You know Roald Dahl. He thought up Willy Wonka and the BFG. But did you know he was a spy? In the new podcast, The Secret World of Roald Dahl, I'll tell you that story and much, much more.
What?
You probably won't believe it either.
Was this before he wrote his stories? It must have been.
Okay, I don't think that's true.
I'm telling you, the guy was a spy. Listen to The Secret World of Roald Dahl on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Then she says, have you seen a photo of my son? And I'm like, who is this person?
Welcome to the Boys and Girls Podcast. Arranged marriage is basically a reality show, and you're auditioning for your soulmate. And who's judging? Only your entire family. I sacrificed myself to this ancient tradition, hoping to find love the right way. And instead, I found chaos, comedy, and a lot of cringe. Listen to Boys and Girls on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everyone, it's Emily Simpson and Shane Simpson from the Legally Brunette podcast.
Each week, we're bringing you true crime through a legal lens.
Whether you want all the facts on the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, or you still need to wrap your head around the Diddy verdict, we're breaking it all down step by step.
And we're not just lawyers, we're also husband and wife. It makes for some pretty entertaining episodes.
Listen to Legally Brunette on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.